Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I am your host, Descent Ascension. I hope everyone had a good International Men's Day. So, getting right into it. I had the fortune to attend the premiere of the documentary American Circumcision on November 11th. My intention was to make a video review immediately after the premiere. However, after seeing it, I had to take some time to sort out my thoughts, and to be honest, I had to take some time to recover from seeing American Circumcision, as the film is a journey fraught with emotion, and what some would even describe as physical trauma. Normally, you have to pay a lot of money to be traumatized like that, but this time, it was only $10 for the ticket. Let's start from the beginning. For the purpose of this review, I will have to disclose that I was a backer for the film's original Kickstarter. And while I do my best to remain impartial, I suppose it would be relevant to disclose that I am an American who regrets having been circumcised as a child. I will not go into these personal details in this review, but for those of you who want to listen to a stranger talk about his penis for half an hour, I suppose I can make a separate video about that. Last year, Cassie J's film The Red Pill made waves in media and activist circles, being the first documentary discussing men's rights. However, Cassie's film only makes a brief mention of circumcision as a men's rights topic. It was obvious that this important discussion was in need of its own film, so I was happy to learn that the documentary American Circumcision was in development. I had the pleasure of meeting Brendan Murata at the premiere. He is a calm and mild-mannered person. He's tall and looks very much like Justin Trudeau, minus the girly haircut. American Circumcision is Brendan's debut as director. While the documentary is quite competent, you can tell that it is the director's first project. In spite of that, I am happy to report that Brendan was able to claim the film festival's prize for Best Documentary. In this review, I will not be introducing the topic of circumcision, nor will I be discussing any talking points in the debate. Rather, I will be focusing on the documentary produced by Brendan Murata, and I will provide links for more information about the topic in the video description. For those not familiar with the debate on circumcision, I highly recommend you do some light reading before continuing this video. Diving right into the film itself, the topic of infant male circumcision is introduced by the narrator as the foremost human rights issue of modern America. Currently, the practice is legal and is the most commonly performed surgery in the country. In essence, there are two sides, one for maintaining or expanding the practice, and one for outlawing the practice. The documentary is organized into two halves. The first half is essentially an infodump of interview points made by both sides. Arguments for and against circumcision are played side by side to create the most direct comparisons possible. For instance, the pro side will push that circumcision improves health, and the counter side will present that there is no hard evidence of benefits, or that there are simpler alternatives that do not require genital cutting. This goes on discussing several points, such as the HIV study, rates of complications for the procedure, the function of the foreskin, and circumcision as a human rights violation. At this point, I was not getting any new information, but for a person who is being introduced to the debate, this section will probably be very overwhelming. I think this pressure could have been eased in several different ways. Narration for the documentary was only present in the first few minutes of the film. I think that if narration was instead used throughout the film to introduce topics, it would at least help the audience frame what topic is being discussed at the time. All the points and data put forward by the interviewees are basically given by spoken word. Numbers and data can always be conveyed by either using diagrams or by overlaying text on the screen. Doing this would allow the audience several different avenues for absorbing the information. Lastly, the documentary never goes back to summarize the points side by side in order to reinforce how the arguments stack up. This legwork is left to the audience to decide for themselves. However, I think it should be obvious that one of the sides cares more to look into details and is presenting better information. The second half of the documentary focuses more on personal interviews regarding anecdotal experience. There is a wide range of perspectives here, including some that surprised even me. However, it's at this point that the film drops any sense of even-handedness, as most of the interviews seem to favor the anti-side. I wonder if it is possible to have more pro-side interviews in the latter half, or maybe there just wasn't anyone else worth hearing from. There are two different African women interviewed, both having undergone a procedure of female circumcision, which is quite rare in the modern day. One of the interviewees feels that she was brutalized and mutilated, while the other claims to have exceptional improvements to her sex life. While the two juxtaposed positions are interesting, I feel that the audience may not be able to see these perspectives in context, without knowing exactly what kind of female circumcision procedure was done to these individuals, as the procedures can vary widely in type and severity. A section that I feel was in desperate need of a more developed segue was the discussion of foreskin restoration. A simple question of, is there anything a person can do to attempt to reverse a circumcision, would have sufficed. While this topic can be very bizarre and awkward, the fact that there are at least 150,000 men actively practicing foreskin restoration in the US is a telling sign of how many men regret their circumcisions, especially given that barely anyone is aware of the practice of foreskin restoration at all. Even more shocking is the section that discusses complications for circumcised infants. The pro side appears to hand-wave complications as so rare or so mild that it is not worth considering. But the anti-side has individual doctors claiming that they have to repair at least 5 bad circumcisions a week. Furthermore, we are provided with a lengthy interview with a woman who becomes an inactivist when she learns that her son's circumcision was botched, the doctor telling her that it was normal. Some of these interviews were quite hard to bear, whether that be from my frothing at the mouth with anger or choking back tears of sympathy, but nothing could ever prepare the audience for the actual live showing of an infant boy's circumcision in the late half of the film. It was a tragedy if I've ever seen one. I paid careful attention to the audience. Grown men sobbed with grief, women wailed in despair, and me, well, I guess you could say that the procedure looked pretty much how I imagined it would. I just didn't expect it to look so damn bloody. The whole time I forced myself to not look away. I could feel my entire body tense up, my nails digging into my knees. This documentary wasn't about some faraway problem that I could forget as soon as I left the theater. This horror was real. If I can be honest for a moment, I do not know how Brendan was able to stand idly by in order to capture that footage. If it were me behind that camera, I think I would have murdered everyone in that room. But I was not there, and I could stop no one. Now, if we can take a step back for a moment, I think American Circumcision does a competent job of presenting the essential information for the topic. And I know that screen time is a huge constraint when it comes to producing films. But I feel that there are a couple of points that could have improved the film vastly if they were covered during its runtime. First, the film only touches very briefly on the history and origins of the practice of circumcision. I think if this were explored further, it would have given much better context for why something that seems so barbaric can still be practiced in the modern day. What makes this interesting is that circumcision seems to be a practice that pops up in many cultures around the globe, independent of religion. It is possible that it is health that ties all of it together, or maybe it could be a form of self-inflicted human sacrifice. This is something I would like to know more about. Second, while the film specifically focuses on American politics, I think it would have been very helpful to contrast the current state of circumcision in America with other first world countries. How did the practice come to be so commonplace in America, but not elsewhere? If circumcision is supposed to stave off sexually transmitted infections, then why does America have the highest rate of STDs? Also, foreigners do not understand the whole lotion aspect of masturbation for Americans, because apparently, you're not supposed to need lotion to masturbate. Doing international interviews could have possibly been difficult production and budget-wise, but I think it could have added a lot to the documentary. Overall, I think American Circumcision is a very competent work. It essentially approaches the topic as a cut-and-dry documentary, choosing to do all of its legwork through interviews and data. Personally, I would have preferred some sort of overarching narrative, as I feel storytelling is a much better way to convey the human experience than just straightforward facts. I suppose what I was looking for was some kind of silver bullet that would cause the entire culture of genital cutting to come crashing down. However, that is probably too much to ask of one film. I mean, you remember how the audience responded to the footage of a circumcision being performed? There are literally persons interviewed for the film who personally performed circumcisions on their own children and felt proud of doing so. If those people cannot be convinced to change their minds, then I don't know how far we can take this battle. I know this fight has been going on for many decades, but for most people, American circumcision is a good first step. I find it to be a good introduction to the topic, and at the least, it should probably be mandatory viewing for new parents and medical students. Now, that is not to say that it is the final word on the topic, as I feel it can be expanded on in a multitude of ways. If Brendan Murata is not yet completely burned out on thinking and talking about penises yet, I think he would be in a good place to either create follow-up projects or to release American Circumcision's raw footage to the public. Otherwise, there is still a lot of great content here on YouTube covering the topic of circumcision. DoctorRandomerCam has several great discussions on the topic. HoneyBaderRadio has a podcast with Lindsay who conducted research into the functionality of the foreskin, because no one ever thought to do that before for some reason. Teal Deer also has a very detailed presentation regarding the various forms of circumcision seen in different cultures. These I will all list in the video description. Should any viewers have any other resources they find valuable to add, please leave a link in the video comments below. I will make sure to approve all comments for viewing. I think that will do it for my thoughts on American circumcision. I want to thank Brendan Murata again for producing the documentary. I recommend that you see the film as it becomes available. I hope that this video has been informative for anyone curious about the film. If you have any questions or thoughts, please leave a comment below. That'll be it for now. See you all next time.